Welcome to Global Information Security Society for Professionals of Pakistan.
Are now offered as a software as a service. Tenant, one or more cloud service users sharing access to cloud source. We talked about in detail, we talked about the example of a building where multiple people, multiple tenants living in the same building. That's the same concept applied to cloud computing. There's a cloud service. Consider cloud service as an apartment building, and then in that apartment building, there are multiple users using that services offered in that apartment building. So, and tenants are the people who are using it. All right, so next one is cloud computing roles. Again, very, very, very important topic. You will get questions on cloud computing roles. So there are different roles, and we'll discuss further about these. So what is a cloud auditor? So I see it, there are a lot of questions about GRC, there are a lot of questions about compliance. All that thing comes under the role of cloud auditor, right? So a cloud service partner who is responsible for conducting an audit of the use of cloud service. An audit may be for general security hygiene, but it is often for legal or compliance purpose. Now, let me give you a quick example on this one. You are a company that are selling products, right? So you're selling products online and you're accepting credit cards, maybe Visa card or MasterCard or whatever the case may be. So you're accepting those credit cards. And now your e-commerce application, your processing application is hosted in a cloud service provider. Now, since you are, using, it's an e-commerce website, so everybody is paying via credit card. You need to make sure that your application and your processing gateway is hosted on a compliant, PCI compliant cloud service provider if you're using a cloud service. So in that case, what cloud service provider will do is they will provide you a PCI compliance report to you that, hey, you can use our cloud service. And this is our compliance certificate. We have our audit, PCI audit done last year, and it was done by so-and-so company. And that so-and-so company in this case is cloud auditor that provides a report, a compliance report to me as a customer who is running an e-commerce business. And the same apply to if you have other compliance requirement, if you have HIPAA compliance requirement for healthcare, if you have federal compliance requirement. So somebody, a third party, a cloud auditor makes sure that the service that I'm going to be using as a client is compliant with whatever the regulatory requirement I need to comply with. So cloud auditor provide that services. A cloud service broker is a cloud service partner who negotiate relationship between cloud service provider and cloud service customer. So again, it's a middleman. So broker is the middleman. And usually it happens, broker comes in really large deals where millions and millions of dollars are involved in the utilization of service. So if you probably go to a cloud service provider directly, you might not get a good deal or good terms. Then you involve a broker, which basically act as an agent between the two, CSP and CSS, or cloud service, to come up with common terms and conditions, whether it may be security, whether it may be monetary, right? So that's the cloud service broker provide. Cloud service customer, again, we talked about it. We as an end user or a company as an end user as a cloud service customer. Cloud service partner, again, cloud service partner is a generic term. So an auditor is a partner, a service broker is a partner. So a person or group that supports the provision, use, or other activities of the cloud service provider, the cloud service customer, or both is cloud service provider. So if you are a third party providing cloud related services, whether it to be to a cloud service provider or it to be a cloud service customer, you are considered as a cloud service partner, right? So again, partners are usually in the middle of both. They are working either with cloud service provider, or they are working with cloud service customer. They are not the direct beneficiary of cloud services. They help. They have a helping role. A cloud service provider, we talked about it. I don't think we need to go to this again. A cloud service user, a person or entity, which may be a device. So we talked about who is a cloud service user. All right, so now we're going to talk about cloud computing characteristics. Remember the very first definition that we talked about? So now we are talking about characteristics of cloud computing. Correct. So number one is on-demand self-service. So by design, cloud service provider allow customers to procure and provision cloud resources by anyone who wants to or need them. Anybody wants a break? Are we good? Should we continue, or do you want a break of maybe 5 or 10 minutes? It's been an hour. Please let me know in the chat. If you want, we can take a break and regroup at 1:15. Okay. Okay, we'll continue. All right, so broad network access. Obviously, the purpose of cloud computing is broad network access, right? It has to be available. If it is not available, if it is not broadly accessible, then what's the point of cloud computing, right? So cloud resources should be accessible by any authorized user, cloud users with an internet connection. So if you have seen, AWS zones, it is basically spread across all the globe to provide availability at the local zones, and all those zones are connected with each other. So there are multiple, points between all those zones to provide availability and, to minimize any downtime that may happen. Resource pooling, we talked about. It is another characteristics of cloud computing, that in the cloud computing environment, you basically pool all the resources, and then once you pool the resources, you make those resources available for your consumer to consume. Rapid elasticity. This is a new concept. You will get questions on this rapid elasticity in your exam. At the core of cloud computing, rapid elasticity allow a cloud customer to quickly obtain additional resources as the user needs require. So give you an example. So like in Western world, when Christmas comes in, right? There are a lot of online stores that have to sell their merchandise, right? So usually what happens is that Christmas, or maybe in Pakistan, Eid, or other, countries, they have their own celebration. So what happened during these, different events, people start buying stuff more and more as a gift to be given to their relatives, to their friends, or to their loved ones. So what happens is that increases the traffic to that e-commerce websites. So let's take an example of Daraz.com, which is probably everybody in Pakistan is familiar with. So maybe during Eid time, more people are accessing Daraz.com to buy stuff. So what happens? The load increases. Now, if Daraz.com is hosted on AWS, I do not know where it is hosted, but I'm just giving an example. So if it is, and now more people are coming in and more people are buying and browsing that website and buying stuff, if it is not elastic, if where it is hosted does not give them capability to increase either the bandwidth, increase processing, then Daraz.com may get, may go down because it cannot handle the load. So by elasticity means, as the customer, as the website, or as the application usage increases, and it may require more processing, it may require more bandwidth, it may require more storage, the cloud computing should allow for that. Daraz admin should be able to go to their AWS account and increase resources. And then once the season passed, the demand decreases on their website, he should be able to also decrease the use of resources to meet the requirements. Make sense? Any other questions so far on this slide or rapid elasticity? Yeah, so pooling is basically talked about resources itself and how flexible you are in utilization of that pooling of resources to increase and decrease. That's what we call elasticity. So it's not dynamic application. It's basically allocation of resources to address the demand on that application. All right, so measured services. So measured services is, we talked about cloud computing makes it exceedingly easy for customers to monitor, measure, control, and report on their resource usage. So again, since you are using the resource that are allocated to you, and you're going to be charged based on the usage of resources, so you can monitor how much you are using, you can measure and generate reports. And this is very important aspect is in large organizations, somebody in the organization is monitoring how the cloud is being used inside the organization so they can manage their budget. It is a very handy thing to budgeting and forecasting for the future, and to actually have an insight into how the cloud services is being used in their organization. So they may increase or decrease the future use of their cloud services. All right, so the next topic in this domain is cloud reference architecture. So there are multiple components as part of the cloud reference architecture, and we're gonna go through these fairly quickly. So we're gonna be first talking about cloud computing activities. Again, I can see that, the information is being repetitive, but it has been presented in a different way. So the way it is presented and the way it is being used in the exam, it is important to understand. So cloud computing activities, so cloud service providers. So these roles that we're gonna be studying, going to be look at over here, again, pretty much are very important from the exam. So cloud service provider. So under cloud service provider, there are 2 roles. Under cloud service customer, there are 3 roles. Under cloud service partner, there are 2 roles. So now we looked at the roles individually, but now we're gonna be looking at those roles and their activities in these 3 broader categories, which is CSP, CSC, and CSP. In this case, CSP is cloud service partner, but when the CSP is used, generally it is basically cloud service provider. So in cloud service provider, there are 2 broad roles. One is cloud service operation manager, and other one is technical account manager. So cloud service operation manager, his responsibility is to oversee and manage the operation and performance of cloud service provided to customers. So this is a larger role. This guy might be looking at multiple clients and just making sure that services and operations to those clients are properly managed and customer are happy. And he has a larger responsibility in overseeing everything for a certain segment of customer. And a cloud service provider may have multiple cloud service operation managers who are maybe divided over zones, areas, or maybe different accounts. Then you have technical account manager. This guy is responsible for providing account support and high-level technical guidance to cloud customers. So this guy is more on hand. He talks to individual customers and then provide high-level technical guidance to their cloud customers. And again, an organization has multiple technical account managers dealing with multiple customers. And if you go to Amazon Jobs website, you will see technical account manager jobs listed all over the place on their websites. Cloud service customer. So cloud architect is, so that is the cloud service provider. Now, being the customer, what kind of roles you may have in your organization if you are a cloud customer, right? So if a large organization, you might have users who are architects. You might have seen jobs on LinkedIn or everywhere that somebody is looking for a cloud architect or cloud service administrator. So these are different job roles that are available. And depending upon the size of the organization, all role exists or few role exists out there. So cloud architect in an organization, and these are at the customer side, not at the provider side. So cloud architect evaluate cloud technology and services and design the overall architecture of the cloud deployment to meet organizational requirements. So it might be, you know, a guy in a hospital, and if hospital is trying to use a cloud service, the cloud architect responsibility is he needs to understand what are the HIPAA requirements. He needs to understand what are the privacy and security requirements in healthcare industry, and based on that, he is able to determine what is an organization requirement for cloud security and develop the cloud security architecture for that organization. So most of you who will have CCSP and now you want to become a cloud specialist, you might go for AWS Cloud Architect certification or Azure Cloud Architect certification, which will basically be very specific to you know, to a technology that you will be working with in an organization. So, I mean, looking at the market capture of these organizations, AWS is the largest cloud service provider out there. So if you have, you know, AWS certification, or if you're good with AWS, then you have a better chance to get a job in the job market. And plus, if you have CCSP, which provides you an overall understanding. So CCSP plus a technical or multiple technical certification for a cloud service provider will make you a very desirable candidate in the market today. Cloud service user, we talked about it. Any Joe Schmo, any person like myself who is just who is not technical and just using cloud services is a cloud service user. And the cloud service administrator, he's the guy who or girl who is responsible to configure, manage, and monitor the use of cloud services. So this is just like a network administrator who is responsible for creating accounts, you know, setting up users, changing passwords, managing storage. So this cloud service administrator, exactly the same job, but since organization is using cloud services, that's his job. Any questions so far on these roles? So please feel free to ask. Then we have cloud service partner. We talked about auditor is a cloud service provider. We talked in depth about auditor and why auditor is needed. And then we have cloud service broker. We talked about cloud service broker. I don't think so we have to talk about it again. Okay, moving on. Cloud service capabilities. So we talked about it independently about infrastructure service capability, platform service capability, and software service capabilities, IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS. So infrastructure, you know, cloud service provider can provide you network, storage, you know, computing resources, and platform services. They can provide you various programming libraries. You can access virtual machines, and it's built on top of infrastructure. And software as a service is, you know, just whole application is available to you by the cloud service provider. Again, you know, Salesforce is an example, Office 365 is an example, Word, Excel, you know, Google Sheets, other Office-like offerings that Google has. Those are all software service capability. Your Gmail is a software service capability offered by Google Cloud. So these are individual columns that you can see. IaaS, it provides you compute, storage, and network resources. It has underlying infrastructure that is fully managed by cloud service provider. As a customer, you can deploy and run software and services on that infrastructure, and the customer may have limited control over select networking devices. So then you have PaaS, which is in the middle, as I mentioned earlier. The cloud service provider provide libraries, services, and development environment. As I mentioned, most of the development organizations, software houses use PaaS. Customer create and deploy applications. Mostly developers create and deploy applications to test in PaaS environment before, you know, publishing them into a production environment. CSP is responsible for patch and deploy systems. So if you have a Windows machine as part of the PaaS, It is the responsibility of cloud service provider to patch that Windows machine, to patch, infrastructure machines, to patch Linux machines. And the general security is responsible for cloud service provider. Then the last is the customer maintains and control over deployed application and may be able to configure hosting environment. Now, if I'm deploying my own application on a PaaS environment, then I am the responsible for updating my application. SaaS is everything, CSP is responsible for everything. CSP manages the entire infrastructure and platform. In SaaS, customer leases or borrow license as needed, and customer may have limited control of application and configuration settings. So if you look at it from left to right, from IaaS to PaaS, you can see in IaaS, customer has more responsibilities. In PaaS, both CSP and customer has kind of shared equal sort of responsibility. And in SaaS, your cloud service provider has more responsibilities. So you can see on left side, customer has more responsibilities. On the right side, provider has more responsibilities. In the middle, they both share the responsibility. So cloud is a shared responsibility model architecture. Okay, so previously we talked about, so again, remember, these are service categories. Now we are talking about deployment models. So there are four deployment models: public, private, community, hybrid. We talked briefly about all of these models previously. So you have public is open to general public, may be owned by the private company or entity, and highly scalable resources. Then private, it is exclusively single to an organization, may be owned by the organization or third party, or may exist on premise or off premise. Then you have community, used exclusively by community of similar organizations like government agency. We talked about it. May be owned by a community member, a third party, or co-owned. And the last one is a support disaster recovery for a customer considering private cloud. And the hybrid is basically any combination of previous three. So it could be public private, it could be public community, it could be private community, it could be community public. So any of the combination of these three falls under hybrid category, right? So allow customer to have control over their most critical systems, and customer maintains increased ownership and control over their resources. Any questions? Yes, the disaster recovery plan is part of this, course. So we'll talk about disaster recovery plan. So again, you need to look at, it's a shared responsibility model, and disaster recovery is the responsibility of both client as well as service provider. So we'll look more into it. And when you acquire a cloud service, you just do not go blindly into in acquiring these services. There's a lot of background work that happens when you're acquiring a cloud service in a large organization. And this CCSP certification prepares you for that. It will allow you to think, it will allow you to plan, and it will allow you to understand various moving parts. So if you work for an organization as a cloud architect or a cloud senior architect, you need to understand what is involved so that you can address those issues upfront before you sign the contract. Okay, so again, cloud shared considerations, interoperability. So interoperability is the ability of two or more systems to seamlessly work together by sharing in information and using that information as necessary. So, it's based simple. Two cloud service providers should be interoperable and they can share information. Portability and reversibility, we talked about what is portability. The data should be able to move from one cloud service provider to another cloud service provider. If a cloud service provider does not allow that and it is storing data in a proprietary format, then that's a bad cloud service provider. You do not want to go to a cloud service provider that is storing your data in a specific format and that is limiting your options as a customer. So you need to keep your options open. So being a cloud architect, you need to understand these considerations. Vendor lock-in, again, so if cloud service provider does not allow portability, that results in vendor lock-in. Why? Because cloud service provider has your data. They have, have your data. You cannot move your data out. Now you're locked in that vendor. In an organization case, AWS is a vendor. Now, if AWS store a data in a specific format or other things, then you're locked with data with AWS. If they increase rate, you cannot do anything because it's a kind of a ransomware type of tactic that these cloud service providers do, right? So they lock you in. It's not easy for you to get out of that cloud service provider and move to another cloud service provider. So it's a bad tactic. And as an architect, if you feel like if you are looking and researching for your organization that you need to look for a cloud, then you need to look at all of these aspects. Availability, again, CIA availability, you need to make sure that you have to have a 99.9% uptime. So if a cloud service provider cannot guarantee 99.9% uptime, then generally speaking, organizations as a customer do not go with their cloud. Resiliency. So it measures the ability of a cloud provider to continue providing fully functioning services in the event of disruption. And that's where disaster recovery and business continuity plan comes in. So you need to ask for their BCP and DRP, that how resilient they are. If something happens, if one of their data center is hit by a natural disaster, whether it be a flood, whether it be an earthquake or something like that, how resilient they are, that their data, multiple data centers are available. DCP is disaster. BCP, it's business continuity plan, not DCP, it's BCP, B as in boy, business continuity plan and disaster recovery plan. So in case a natural disaster happens, which basically impact your business, how can you continue with your business? Because you do not want to lose business if your applications, like for example, Daraz.com, right? They are doing maybe millions of rupees of business in a day. What happens? The data center went down where they're hosting their servers. They're losing money, right? Their business continuity got impacted. So they need to have backup plans. So if something happens with the minimal amount of downtime, they can recover and resume their business. And there are a lot of considerations that you need to do on how to plan your disaster recovery. How on-premise organization data center is different from private on-premise cloud? It's not. It's basically, as I mentioned, you are hosting your data on somebody else's computer, and the same controls that applies on your private or on-prem data center should be applicable on the service provider, right? It's basically you're offloading all these responsibility to somebody else now instead of you taking care of it. And that's where the idea of CapEx and OpEx comes in. We'll talk about that why people are going to cloud rather than hosting their own data center and doing all their BCP and DRP. So that's what we call the capital expenditure versus operational expenditure. So we'll talk about that. Security and privacy security is often the top concern of a potential cloud customer. It can be their major selling point or a barrier in adoption. So I remember when like 10 years back, when this cloud is picking up and a lot of organizations are going, there's a big concern. And I did not host my data on OneDrive or Google until 2 years ago, because I was concerned that if my data is there and if something gone bad, if something happened, my personal data will be stolen. So I have my own external hard drive where I was storing my personal information, right? My sensitive documents and my pictures and everything was stored locally. I still keep a local copy, but now I have certain level of confidence in these cloud service provider where I can host my data securely. So, I use two-factor authentication. I encrypt my data locally before I upload to a cloud service. So yeah, so I still do not have 100% trust, but that's me. Other cloud considerations are, Performance, obviously, have to have cloud performance. It has to be good. So are we doing good so far? Or should I continue? We have 10 more slides. Do you want me to cover, or you want to take a break, or just let me know? So we should be done by another 30 minutes or so. You want to take a break? Okay. Okay, so we'll keep going then. So governance. So governance relates to policies, procedures, roles, and responsibility in place to ensure security, privacy, resiliency, and performance. So again, I see a lot of questions regarding compliance. It seems like the compliance is a big thing in the rest of the world, but there's a lot of compliance that is questions that were asked. So again, if your organization have specific compliance requirement, a governance requirement, or GRC requirements that you have to deal with, you need to talk to your cloud service provider, make sure that they meet your regulatory requirements, and then you can select that service. Again, that is the responsibility of a cloud architect. So earlier in the chat, somebody mentioned NDA, non-disclosure agreement. That may be one part of all the documentation that goes in between cloud service customer and cloud service provider. But the main document, and you will get a lot of SLA questions in the exam, but the main document that establishes terms and conditions between cloud service provider and cloud customer is the service level agreement. So SLA is everything. So in a cloud service level agreement is an agreement between cloud service provider and cloud customer that identifies the minimum level of services that must be maintained. So SLA establishes minimum level of services that a customer is expecting from a cloud service provider. And if cloud service provider does not meet that SLA, there are consequences. And those consequences may be through a lawsuit or just losing the customer, right? And obviously businesses do not want to lose their customers. So what are some few things that are addressed in SLAs, right? Availability is one. How much is the uptime? I talked about 99.9% uptime. We talked about performance. We talked about data ownership, who owns the data, and we looked at what are the different types of ownership and who owns what. We discussed that previously. Location of the data. So this is very interesting. So like in US, all the federal government data, which is should remain in the US geographical boundary. US does not allow cloud service provider to store their data, federal data, either in Canada or any other place on the planet Earth for that matter. They want their data to be hosted in US. So any cloud service provider that is servicing US government right now is bound by the SLA to store the data within the US. You cannot store any data outside the US for federal government. Portability of data. We talked about in depth what portability of data is. Data security and privacy, again, multi-tenancy environment, where basically you do not want data of one tenant to be viewed by another tenant, right? So you need to have that security and privacy. So encryption plays a role. So that would be encryption at rest. The data that is stored, I talked about it, that I encrypt my data and then stored in the cloud. So while my data is sitting there, that's what we call a data at rest encryption. And cloud service providers also provide encryption capabilities, rather than if you do not want to use your own encryption, then cloud service provider provide that capability to encrypt your data. Then in transit is basically, data being communicated from cloud service customer to cloud service provider. So simple example is, as you know, AWS, Azure, whatever the case may be, you are accessing it through a browser, right? What is the secure protocol? HTTPS. So the data that is being transmitted from your computer into the cloud has to be encrypted, right? So you use HTTPS, you use certificates to encrypt that data. And who is permitted to access your data, right? So is cloud service provider at limited? And at this point, NDA does come in, right? Because data is stored in the cloud. So cloud service provider has to be bound by the NDA so that they do not share your data with anybody else. So technically it is hosted on their systems and they own it, right? So NDA, SLAs. So these are all various documents that establishes that bind between service provider and customer. So these are very generic documents. These are very generic, but they have a legal value. They have a value. If somebody do not, abide by the conditions written in these documents, and then there are consequences, right? Disaster recovery is basically what solution and processes are in place for disaster recovery and backup. So disaster recovery we talked about briefly. We'll talk about it more in later chapters. Moving on. No, I have not experienced statewide restrictions. Usually a state also wants their data to be in the US, whatever the state may be, that doesn't matter. I have not seen any state level restrictions as long as they're in US. Okay. But I may be wrong. I have not seen it personally, but in extreme cases, it might be the case, but I have not seen personally. Maintenance and versioning. So the cloud service category being used will determine just how much consideration must a customer must give to maintenance and versioning. So with SaaS offering, the CSP is responsible for just about all patches, maintenance, and versioning. Microsoft released a new version of Microsoft Word or Excel and everything. So they are responsible for that. They maintain all the versions. We don't care. Moving up to stack to PaaS, even more with IaaS, the customer has increasing responsibility for their actions. So again, as I talked about IaaS, customer has more responsibility. PaaS, responsibility kind of become equal between customer and provider. And then with SaaS, provider has more responsibilities. Regulatory compliance, we talked about it. Again, PCI, if there are any legal or any penalties, HIPAA, there are multiple regulatory compliance that need to be considered when getting a client, when acquiring a client services. Auditability. The CSP is responsible for providing logging and auditing capabilities, but that's another thing. If you are just like in your own data center in your organization, you need audits. If incident happens, what is the one true source to identify how incident happened, to create a story of the incident, event logs, right? The auditing needs to be enabled into critical application. Events needs to be generated of the actions that has been taken into cloud and the applications, right? So you use those audit logs, those event logs to create a story in case of an incident. So auditability is a big, and most of the organization, you must have heard of what do you call the security brokers? I'm blanking out over here the name, but Microsoft has one. And so what you can do is you can have audit logs on-prem. Many people configure Splunk to basically collect logs from their cloud environment and bring it back to their environment so that they have data. CASP, thank you very much. Yeah, CASP, cloud security. Cloud access security broker. Thank you very much. I completely blanked out on that one. So Microsoft has CASP solution, AWS, and there are third parties that offer these CASP solutions. And what these does is they act as a broker. These solutions act as a broker. You can, through Microsoft CASP solutions, you can set up endpoint protection. You can do logging. You can do access control. There are a lot of things you can do between on-prem and your cloud environment. And these CASP solutions provide that capability. So cloud access security brokers, CASB solutions. Thank you. Security concepts relevant to cloud computing. So other concepts are cryptography. So again, I got a question on this one on key management. So they will ask you a question that you are a cloud, you are using a cloud service, or including what is the best method for key management, right? So obviously encryption, with encryption comes with keys, right? Keys to encrypt, keys to decrypt your data. Now, you can only encrypt or decrypt the data if you have the right keys, and the location of that keys is critical, right? So if the keys are stored at the cloud service provider, then you do not have control of the keys. If the cloud service provider goes away, then you are locked out of your data, right? So consider you have a house, you put a lock on the house, and you give the key to your neighbor, and you went out on a vacation. You come back, and now you found out that your neighbor has died, or he's not there, or he has also gone on the vacation, and he has the keys with him. You are stuck. You cannot enter your house because you do not have access to the key. So in this scenario, maybe your cloud service provider is that neighbor who just gone away, and he has the keys of your encrypted data, and you're sitting there doing nothing. So these are the concepts that you need to understand. And as an architect, you need to understand these concepts. So cryptography, so data at rest refer to the data stored in system device and not actively being used. Data in transit, we talked about, data being transferred between two endpoints. And data in use is sometimes forgotten, but this is the third state of digital state. Data refers to information that is actively being processed by an application. So in this case, credit card numbers, they are being used, right? So that is a good example of data in use. And usually what happens is that while the data is used, it is also encrypted at the same time. And usually it gets decrypted in the memory for processing, and then on the storage physical drive, it is still in the encrypted format. So that provides an additional level of security. Key management, so there are two key managements: remote key management system, KMS stands for key management system, and client-side KMS. Remote key management services is the one that is owned, operated, and maintained on-premise by customers. So you become a remote key management. So your application, your data is in the cloud, but you're hosting your keys with you, right? This configuration gives the customer complete control over who can generate cryptographic keys. Sometimes something to keep in mind with remote KMS is that it requires constant network connectivity between cloud customer and CSP. Disruption in connectivity may prevent encryption and decryption function from cloud. So what happens is that most of the applications, when you develop these applications, you want to encrypt the data. And when you encrypt the data, you sometimes have to manage the keys so that encryption and decryption happens on the fly. So you use a key management system. One of the quick examples that I can give you that is being used a lot with application development is called HashiCorp. So I can type it over here. It's called HashiCorp. So this is the solution that is available. It's an open source, and you can use it where it's a key management server, and you can have that key management server hosted on your site. And at that application that is hosted in the cloud, if it wants to encrypt or decrypt the data, it has to communicate back with HashiCorp server to encrypt and decrypt the keys. And sometimes you host HashiCorp in the cloud as well. So client-side KMS is provided by CSP, but the customer generates, hold, and manage the keys. Client-side KMS, again, gives the customer a great deal of control over their keys. So in the exam, you will get a question of which one is the best key management system, and 100% of the time is client-side KMS is the best answer, because you need to have control over your client, over your keys. So remember that it's a short exam question about this one. Okay, security concepts relevant to cloud computing. We have 6 more slides. Are we good so far? All right, just let me know by thumbs up if it is good. Okay. Access control. So the security concepts about cloud computing. So number 1 is access control. So access control and its related technology give way to identity and access management, IAM, which is the sum of all technologies, processes, and personnel that are responsible for controlling access to resources. So IAM can be broken into various components, which is account provisioning and deprovisioning. Again, same thing. Yes, it is this one, HashiCorp. Directory services, privileged access management. So let me give you an example that we have worked, I worked one of my recent clients. So this is a large financial organization. They have their on-site, they have about, a user base of about 50,000 to 100,000 users. And they have their own Active Directory on premise. So once they move into the cloud, they choose to go with Azure. So Azure, obviously it's a Microsoft product. So obviously it has provide integration with Active Directory, which is on-prem. So now what they're doing is they install a server on site, which we call AD Connect. And then that AD Connect act as a middle between Active Directory that is on and access that users will be access Excel or whatever the cloud services be. So all the authentication data is being communicated between on-prem and Azure Cloud is through that AD Connect server that is on-prem of that client. So IAM, obviously, it's a base is a core of any cloud service. You cannot have open access. You have to control access just like you're controlling access on-prem. Then we have data and media sanitization. Cloud computing are often focused on migrating to the cloud, but many cloud customers who also wants to understand how they can remove their data from the cloud whenever that time should come. So again, as part of the SLA, it needs to be documented that once the contract is terminated and client no longer wants to use that particular cloud services, what happened to that data? How the cloud service provider will remove the data. Ultimately, if you look at it, the data is stored on a physical device on a cloud service provider, right? So on hard disk. So they have to provide their methodology on how they erase the data. Are they degaussing? Are they, throwing away the hard disk? Are they, destroying the hard disk in a way that the data is not recoverable? So all those things needs to be considered, right? So you being the cloud architect or you being the senior lead on the cloud effort in your organization, understand these considerations. Network security, network and security plays a huge role in cloud computing. Again, you might have heard of software-defined networks, and what software-defined networks is again, virtual networking, right? In the cloud, if you go back to these, this one, do they have network services over here? They don't, but every cloud service provider, they call something about their network services. So again, so these are considered as, firewalls, VLANs, other type of networking services, how data you laid out. If you are creating a firewall policy, all of this is part of network security. And in cloud, basically, you have your own network. If you have virtual firewalls over cloud, that is correct. Azure VNet, yep, that is correct. Thank you. So yeah, AWS as VPCs, exactly. So all of these things are part of comes under network security, network and network security, and how you set up them, how you create policies, how you create objects, how you create, traffic paths. Everything is done through network security and subnets. Yep. Security concepts. Okay, virtualization security. This is This is 100% guarantee you're going to get one question on this one, right? So virtualization security, we know that cloud works on abstraction. Abstractions means akhaz karna, right? So your virtual machines help in that abstraction. You create virtual machines, and in order to create virtual machines, you need to have hypervisors. So VM is a hypervisor. VirtualBox, which is an open source, is a hypervisor. You can install Windows, Linux on it on your computer. So a hypervisor is a computing layer that allows multiple operating systems to run, right? VMware Workstation is a hypervisor on the same piece of hardware, with each operating system seeing the machine resources as its own dedicated resource. So there are two types of hypervisors. So understand, yeah, Hyper-V is Microsoft, I think. So two types of hypervisor. One is type 1, and the second one is type 2. So you need to be very careful in understanding what are these two types of hypervisors are. First one is the type 1 hypervisors are called bare metal hypervisors. What it means is that you can install this hypervisor directly on computer. You do not need an operating system to run this hypervisor on top of it. Like in our regular case, I mean, I use VirtualBox on my machine to run Linux, right? So, but I have to have a Windows operating system to install VirtualBox and then run Linux into it. So in this case, it is a type 2 hypervisor. Type 1 hypervisor does not require an operating system. It just runs, it has its own layer. It communicates directly with the hardware, and you can run virtual machines on top of it. So that's one hypervisor. So type 1, or it is called bare metal hypervisors. Type 2 hypervisors are software-based and run on an operating system, right? So is that clear? So you need to be very interested. So type 1 bare metal, type 2 requires an operating, these are called software-based. Yeah, so Hyper-V is a type 2 hypervisor. All right, we are just reaching towards the end. So what are the common threats? These threats are, we call egregious 11 threats. Yeah, VMware Workstation is also a type 2 hypervisor. That is correct. So, what are the common threats to cloud? Data breach. We all heard in the past about S3 bucket, being compromised. So data breach happened because S3 bucket which is a storage, was not properly set up. Misconfiguration, inadequate change control. Lack of cloud security architecture and strategy. So after this certification, if you study for it, correctly and understand what they are talking about, then you are able to understand what is involved when acquiring a cloud service and using a cloud service. Insufficient identity, credential access management, account hijacking, insider threat, insecure interface, and APIs. We talked about APIs at the start of this thing. I think in US it was $550, the cost of the exam. Weak control plane, limited cloud usage visibility, lack of auditing, and abuse and nefarious use of cloud services. So these are various common trends. I did not write the detail of each of it. You can read them in the book, but these are what we call CSA's 2019 egregious 11. So these are the top threats that CSA identified in 2019.
ध्यान भाई 450 USD, right?
Jay?
$450 US बोला आपने ना?
550. 550.
Okay.
Jay, 550. Okay, so design principles, how many slides we have? Bus, 3 more slides. We are good so far? 3 more slides. Are you guys good for 3 more slides? All right, so design principle for secure cloud computing. Okay, so this is again, and all the topics that we talk about, they're important from examination point of view. So do not skip on any of these. So in the cloud, there is a secure data lifecycle. I know we briefly touched upon data. We talked about NDA, we talked about SLA, but we need to understand how data actually is, what is the life cycle of the data when we are talking about cloud services, right? So that life cycle starts from creating the data. So either data is generated from scratch or existing data is modified or updated. So very first time when you acquire a cloud service and you write the data or you upload existing data into the cloud, that's where the data is born. So the data birth happen at that time, right? So either you create the data from scratch or you upload the existing data. So that's the creation or birth of data that happens. Okay, then we have store. So once the data is created, once the data is born, then you have to store the data somewhere, right? So the data is staged into storage system or repository, and that's where various data blocks, S3 bucket, or different types of cloud storage comes into play to store and hold that data. And depends upon the type of data, you select the storage type in cloud. And we will look at various storage types, block storage versus volume storage in the cloud, and what type of data gets stored into various types of storage units in the cloud. So we'll study that later. Use, data is processed by a user or application, how the data is being used, right? Then share, data is made accessible by other users or system. Archive, of an archive. So data is transferred from readily accessible storage to a more long run static storage state. So how are you backing up the data? How are you storing the data for long-term storage? So that's another part of the life cycle of data. And we'll look at how cloud provides this capability. And then destroy, how the data is deleted and removed from storage, making it permanently inaccessible and unusable. So we talked about these things in bits and pieces in the previous slide. But if you look at it all together, so data has a life cycle, right? And in all of these stages, cloud service providers provide various methods, various services, various processes to manage this data in these various stages in the life cycle. And we will talk about and we'll expand on that later. Other cloud concepts, cloud-based disaster recovery and business continuity plan. It is beyond for this domain. I think it has a dedicated domain. We'll talk about it. Cost benefit analysis, which is very interesting. So steady versus cyclical demand. Remember, I talked about Daraz.com. So cyclical demand basically addresses that. So in a year, in a yearly cycle, when do you think Daraz.com might have more traffic? Maybe Badi Eid, Choti Eid, or some other festivals, right? People are shopping more. So that's a cycle, right? So in that cycle, obviously Daraz if Daraz is using its cloud service provider elasticity, it will pay during that cycle more to the cloud to be more elastic. And then once that thing drops down, when the usage drops down for Daraz, the elasticity allow Daraz to come back, right? So that's the steady. And then you need to have a steady demand. So then you have to have a baseline that that during the rest of the year, this is my consumption. This is our organization consumption. This is how much users are using. So you establish that baseline. So that's the difference between steady versus cyclical demand. Then you have CapEx versus OpEx. Okay, what is CapEx? CapEx is capital expenditure and OpEx is operational expenditure. So you need to understand the difference between these two, because many of the time people, I had been in discussion that having a cloud service is expensive than having than owning your own data center. So a lot of organizations made their case, and I do not agree with that. And why I do not agree with that is because if you buy your own infrastructure, if you buy your own server, your own networking equipment, your own software, that's what we consider as capital expenditure in your business, right? Because you are doing an expense. And the capital expenditure, it accounts for depreciation at the end when you file taxes, when the business file taxes, that basically you can file for depreciation that over the course of time, your equipment got used or it got broken or whatever. So you can expense it as a capital expenditure, but you do not get much of the return on that. However, in US, at least, operational expenses have a greater benefit, right? So using cloud or buying cloud service is considered as operational expense and not as a capital expense. So cloud service utilization is always considered as operational expense, right? And when you have a business operating expense, you can show it as a business expense when it's time to file business taxes. And when you do that, you get much more tax benefits out of operating expenses rather than capital expenses. So at the end of the day, having a cloud service rather than your own data center is cheaper to the organizations. Ownership and control. Ownership and control is another aspect of cloud computing that we talked about who owns what based on IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS, and responsibility, how the data is being, who owns the data, who owns the application, who owns the infrastructure, who does not own what. So we talked about an organizational focus. Again, if you are acquiring a cloud service, you need to understand your organization. You need to understand your organization's business model. You need to understand your organization compliance requirement, right? So all of those things needs to be understood. These are security considerations for different cloud categories. So IaaS, you need to have co-location and multi-tenancy. You need to understand security considerations around that. Virtual machine attacks, we talked about type 1 and type 2 hypervisors, hypervisor attacks, network security, and DDoS attacks. So these are the security considerations when we are talking about IaaS, right? When we are talking about PaaS, the security considerations are resource isolation, user permissions, user access management, malware backdoors, and other nasty threats, right? And then SaaS is data commingling. You are using Office 365, you're uploading your sensitive Excel file into the cloud by using Microsoft Office 365, which is in the cloud. So you just need to make sure that your data, your financial data does not commingle with another tenant on the cloud, right? So you need to make sure your cloud service have that segregation. Data access policies, how the data will be accessed. Microsoft has this called MEM, Microsoft Endpoint Manager, right? So you have your mobile devices, which you are also using to access your company's, your organization's sensitive information, and you're using that information, Word, Excel, whatever. So MEM basically define these data access policies, that what happened to the data when you're accessing the data through your personal phone, and how you are storing those things. No, you don't have to accept your teacher comment. It depends. It is very subjective. Sometimes for certain organizations, I'm not a financial expert, but for somebody, maybe cloud is expensive, so it is not necessary you go with cloud. I'm talking about in my scenario where I am, and so you are in different parts of the world, so you might have different solutions or different feasibilities, which I cannot talk about. I do not know. So web application security is another concern that you need to concern about when you're talking about SaaS. So these are different, again, based on your business requirement, based on what your company is, what your organization is, based on what a regulatory or GRC compliance that they need to adhere to. These are various frameworks. I think somebody asked a question about what are the different frameworks in cloud security. So these are these frameworks so that you can use when you are looking at or auditing a cloud service provider for an organization. So if you have a role of you are a part of an organization which is a cloud service partner, and that partner is an auditor, right? In that scenario, these are the different frameworks based on the business that you can use to assess a cloud service provider. All right, so I think this is the end of it. Happy to take any other questions in the next 15 minutes. I hope you like this session and you learned something.
Hello, is it over now, huh?
जी, it's over.
रेहान भाई आप तो थके होंगे बहुत ज्यादा, हैं? माशाल्लाह 2 घंटे ऑलमोस्ट
2 घंटे हो गए जी, पूरे 2 घंटे।
सॉरी आपको किसने ब्रेक नहीं लेने दिया। तो मैं ना ऐसे कर दूंगा, मैं सोच रहा था इसको ना मैं एक वीडियो नहीं डालूंगा, मैं भी इसको 2-3 हिस्सों में डिवाइड करके ना डालूंगा ताकि सुनने के लिए भी इजी हो लोगों के लिए।
सही है, सही है।
ठीक है सर, बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया सर। तो आप देख लीजिए नेक्स्ट टाइम के लिए अब आपको आइडिया हो गया, अगर एक में नहीं होती तो आप उसको 200 में डिवाइड कर लेना, ये भी हम देख सकते हैं।
No, I'm good in talking. मुझे मसला नहीं है बोलने का, I teach, so I'm used to it.
सही। So thank you again. किसी को कोई क्वेश्चन है तो वो पूछ सकते हैं, ठीक है? हमने इसको इंग्लिश में रखा है फॉर द मेजर ऑडियंस, लेकिन आप क्वेश्चंस उर्दू में चाहे तो कर सकते हैं। Up to you. If anybody has any question, please ask, or I will end the session now.
Yeah. So I'm available for next 10 minutes if you have any questions. You can open up the mic and ask.
Guys, you can unmute yourself and ask questions if you have any. If there's no questions, just let us know on the chat and we'll end the session. We also did a poll.
Exam,
and I will share the
exam is to study. There is no other tip. I don't have any other tip, just to study.
रेहान भाई चलो मैं एक दो सवाल पूछ लेता हूँ जनरली। स्टडी के अलावा क्या लैब एक्सपीरियंस भी होना चाहिए?
नहीं, आपको जनरल अंडरस्टैंडिंग हो चाहिए कि वेरियस क्लाउड सर्विस कैसे काम करते हैं। जैसा मैंने शुरू में कहा था, वेंडर एग्नोस्टिक सर्टिफिकेशन। तो इट डज नॉट आस्क यू कि आपने AWS को कैसे कॉन्फ़िगर करना है या Azure को कैसे कॉन्फ़िगर करना है। नो, इट जस्ट टॉक्स अबाउट कॉन्सेप्ट्स, क्लाउड कॉन्सेप्ट्स।
बट साहब अनम्यूट करें दोबारा हो जाएगा।
जी सर, अस्सलाम वालेकुम। शुक्र है मैं खुल गया, मेरी सांस रुकी हुई थी। अस्सलाम वालेकुम। रेहान भाई, थैंक यू फॉर द सेशन। आपने एनडीए पे मेरी बैंड बजा दी। एनडीए के लिए मैं एक चीज अर्ज कर दूं जो लाइव एग्जांपल है, हर एक की बिजनेस में होती है। व्हेन वी आस्क अ कोड फ्रॉम डिफरेंट वेंडर्स, ये एक रियल टाइम लाइफ का मैं एग्जांपल देने लगा हूं, स्पेशली इन मिडल ईस्ट, पाकिस्तान, एनीवेयर, यूएस का मुझे नहीं पता। यहाँ पे व्हेन वी गेव आवर रिक्वायरमेंट टू आवर वेंडर्स, we gave them certain information about our environment, what we have, what are our constraints, what are our problems, what solutions we are looking for. अगर वो सारी हमारी प्रॉब्लम कहीं और पे चली जाएंगी तो it's a business risk because everybody else will know what we need. So before giving them our scope of work, we sign an NDA with them. ये स्टोरी उधर से शुरू होती है। Once we will issue a PO, then wo SLAs, everything, then it comes on. So NDA is like first step, जो हमारा supply chain deal करता है, kind of thing. बाद में you verified it like NDA वो बाद में आ जाता है, but that's also fall under kind of
right.
SLA.
No, I was talking in context of cloud service, मगर जो बात आपने की, that is true 100%, right? So for any type of service you are requiring, other than cloud as well, right? So you have to have an NDA in place first before you do anything. So I agree with you on that. So
हमने वो सर्वर खरीदने वो जाके किसी को बता देगा ये 2 सर्वर लेने लगे, चला दो। Okay, for the cloud part, one question. When we talk about cloud, if I have a private cloud, so it will be available over the LAN. I don't need to go over internet to access it. It's my wish how I wanna do it. Like I can do through the VPN, I can access it. Correct me if I'm wrong.
So yes, so there are 2 types of private clouds. One private cloud is the cloud that you can host in your own organization, right? In your own data center. So there are cloud software that allows you to set up your own cloud, like AWS, right? And then that is one type of private cloud. The second type of private cloud is that you have asked your cloud service provider to set up an environment to them for you in their environment, but you are accessing that cloud over your LAN through internet or through VPN. So yes. So, but if you are hosting your private cloud in your own data center, then obviously you do not need VPN because you're accessing your own private cloud over the LAN.
Yeah, लेकिन वो अगर घर से कर रहे हैं तो then they need VPN.
Then you can use a VPN. That's a remote access and all that. Sure.
मैंने मतलब जो लोगों के ज्यादातर क्वेश्चंस थे ना वो इन्हीं चीजों के इर्द गिर्द घूमते थे. जो नॉर्मल IT इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर है, if you have that same thing you consider somewhere else, then it's your cloud. वो ज्यादातर क्वेश्चंस जो शुरू में आए थे वो इसी से रिलेटेड थे, and I was like, अन्ना तो मैंने भी बताया यार.
बटी साहब आप तैयार हैं, आप बस ले लें एग्जाम जल्दी.
मैं सर डर लगता है. अभी मैंने रेहान भाई के 6 सेशन ले रहे हैं. एक और क्वेश्चन था शायद वो मैं कहीं पे मिस कर गया, मुझे आया था. एनीवेज I missed it somewhere. हाँ, अगर रेहान भाई एक you can do us one favor कि like Microsoft use VMware, वो अपना जो AWS है बेसिकली वो VMware का इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर चला रही है. गूगल भी probably VMware बैकएंड पे चला रहा है, or it could be Linux. And then Linux they have. Then there is another one famous in Zen desktops, but they are more into desktops. और फिर अभी एक और आया है जो बड़ा मशहूर है मार्केट में. ये 3-4 हैं. They like if you can get their whole infrastructure pictures, probably वो सबको जरा ज्यादा क्लियर कर देगा कि virtualization होती क्या है, और उसी virtualization को आपने over the web access कर रहे हैं. That's your cloud. Because लोगों का ख्याल है कि वो मेरे जैसे लोगों का कि बादलों से के पीछे कुछ सर्वर वर्वर पड़े हैं जिनको हम virtually connect करते हैं. Yeah, this one.
यही मैंने आपको दिखाई थी ना कि अब it doesn't matter कि आप कौन सा hypervisor use कर रहे हैं. When organizations have their own choice, right? They can use Hyper-V, they can use VMware, right? But all of them sit over here, like this orange hypervisor.
And one more thing लोगों के लिए कि भाई ये जो स्टोरेज डिवाइसेस है इन्होंने बनाया हुआ है राइट साइड पे, वो सर्वर के अंदर भी स्टोरेज हो सकती है, वो सर्वर से हट के भी स्टोरेज हो सकती है. सो इट्स नॉट नेसेसरली हार्डवेयर, कैन बी एनीथिंग, बस वो वर्चुअली अवेलेबल होना चाहिए. दैट्स इट.
फंक्शनैलिटी क्या प्रोवाइड कर रहे हैं.
यस, वो मतलब लोगों का बेसिक कॉन्सेप्ट होता है ना शायद. यू को डिफरेंट स्पेसिफिक मशीन्स है, यू कैन कन्वर्ट योर एग्जिस्टिंग हार्डवेयर टू दीज थिंग्स इफ यू वांट. ये सब के लिए अगर आपके पास एग्जिस्टिंग हार्डवेयर है, यू कैन ब्रिंग देम टू दिस स्टेज इफ यू वांट. अच्छा, दूसरी चीज अबाउट द प्राइसिंग. सो वेयर आई लिव इन सऊदी अरेबिया राइट नाउ, यहाँ पे क्लाउड इतना महंगा है जितना आप अमेरिका में बैठ के सोच भी नहीं सकते. एज कंपेयर टू दुबई even. The prices are a bit higher because of XYZ things. Probably in future it will be cheaper. Number one. Number two, it depends on what you are going to use. Like हमारे कुछ customers हैं वो कहते हैं जी मैं इस department से हूँ, I need a separate machines. They don't believe on IT कि वो उस पे separate जो है वो permissions लगा सकेंगी, restrict कर सकेंगी, XYZ कर सकेंगी. There are some in one organization they have application servers like common application server. Printer के लिए आपको server चाहिए, आपकी कोई specific application चल रही है उसके लिए server चाहिए, आपकी access control है, CCTV है, these type of services you need dedicated machines. Then there are department specific services could be like HR वाले अपना अलग से मांग सकते हैं, supply chain वालों की अलग से है. On top of it, you have your ERP, and then you have your Active Directory, file shares, and then your operational servers and all the stuff. अगर तो आपका ये वाला environment है ना, then you probably need a lot of computing. जब आप उनके resources को इकट्ठा करते हैं, when you do the business calculation, then it will cost you more if you will go to cloud.
Right. मैंने अभी जिक्र किया ना कि depend करता है कि आपकी क्या environment है.
Yes,
right?
people have to do.
आपके टैक्स की एनवायरनमेंट जो भी है, बहुत सारी चीजें कैलकुलेट होती हैं इसके अंदर.
और एक कुछ सर्विस प्रोवाइडर जो हैं वो हार्डवेयर बेस पे they are also now with the pay as you go model. वो कहते हैं आप हमें capex पे ना लो हमारा hardware, आप opex पे ले लो. We will pay you. Yes, we will charge you on a monthly basis. We will not ask you to pay once. That model is also there by some hardware providers. This is number one. Number two, whenever you think about these things in our region, in specifically in Saudi Arabia, I don't know about Pakistan, how it works there. Do a proper ROI, how much it costs you in term of business wise, money wise, how much it costs you. A few more cost which you have to add when you are talking about the physical infrastructure. आपकी electricity per square meter cost for the facility department, आपकी HVAC system की cost, when you have to include all these costs. On top of it, you have to include the cost of the people who will support that infrastructure. ये सारी चीजें जमा करने के बाद आपको पता चलेगा ये आपको कितने में पड़ रहा है, not the hardware cost. और
exactly.
ये मेरे जैसा के लिए
it's a very business decision, or obviously technical folks cannot take all that decision. It's a very decision that has to be taken by organization as a whole, considering expenses, considering your business requirements, ROI जैसा आपने कहा, ये सारी चीजें consider करनी पड़ती हैं.
और आपने एक जगह पे वो क्लाउड मैनेजर वाली स्लाइड थी, उस पे रोल्स पे, तो वो मैं एक पॉइंट उसमें ऐड करना चाहता था.
जी
जहाँ पे क्लाउड सर्विस, where you have like 2 roles here back this. The cloud service operation manager, that is a person. जब आपके पास कोई वो मैनेजर आता है, आप उसको कहते हैं भाई हमें डिस्काउंट दे दो, या हमारे लिए कुछ स्पेसिफिक तुम डील बना दो, हमारी बिजनेस चूंकि बड़ी नीड है तो हमें स्पेशल प्रमोशन दे दो. These things usually go with the cloud operation manager. वो कस्टमर से मिलता है, प्रमोशन करता है, खाने खिलाता है, कॉन्फ्रेंसेस करता है, डील्स देता है, डिस्काउंट्स देता है. That is the service operation manager जो पूरा पोर्टफोलियो देखता है उस सर्विस का.
That's what we call, इनको जनरल टर्म में क्लाइंट मैनेजमेंट कहते हैं, जो कि क्लाउड सर्विस मैनेजर का आ रहा होता है सारी.
सॉरी सर जी, आपके सेशन में छलांग मारने का.
चलिए लेट्स वाइंड अप करें भट्टी साहब, मुझे
शुक्रिया.
2 घंटे हो गए.
Excuse me, I just have a question. I had raised a hand for a long time. First of all, thank you, Rehan. It was one of the best session I've had at this forum. So very much appreciable, very extremely good, I must say.
Thank you.
I think one of my questions just got overlooked by you unintentionally, of course, in the chat. I had asked that can we bring in some visibility on our SIEM solution about the events in the cloud, like we have other, we gather logs from all the on-premise machines into the SIEM solution. So is there any possibility to have such kind of visibility on our SIEM?
Yes, so मैंने जिक्र किया था कि I've seen organizations configuring their Splunk, which is a SIEM solution, right? So Splunk or other solutions, and they connect to cloud services using CASB solutions, which is cloud access and security broker solutions. So उनकी जो अपनी environment है जिसके वो use कर रहे हैं, they actually get the logs from cloud into their Splunk system on premise. So that happens.
Great. Thank you very much once again. It was a lovely session. Thank you very much. Keep it up.
Thank you. All right,
very lovely session, Rehan bhai. Excellent.
Okay, Rehan bhai, बहुत शुक्रिया. I will close it now. Thank you everybody. मैं इंशाल्लाह इसको ना 2-3 हिस्सों में डिवाइड करके मैं इसको अपलोड कर दूंगा, ताकि क्योंकि 1-2 आवर की वीडियो बहुत बड़ी हो जाएगी. So thank you. So inshallah, Rehan bhai, just let me know when we will have the next session. अब हम WhatsApp में डिस्कस कर सकते हैं later.
All right. Okay.
Okay, guys. Bye bye.
Okay.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you.